Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, perfect. Okay, we're ready to kick things off. Just for a second. Today's Thursday, October 20th. It's a little after 8. And this is Darien Public Schools Board of Education Finance Committee meeting. And the first item on our agenda is to review the September 2022 financial report. Mr. Rudel.
So this is the financial report for September. We are showing a positive balance of $9,771. The changes from August total $304,641. The primary changes relate to the approval of the Director of Security and the SSOs. A couple of changes outside of that are additional parking revenue from the high school of $2,900. $3,650 in additional ELP revenue for another student that's been enrolled. And then we were able to secure interns for the fall at Hindley and Tokenique. So that's a reduction of $15,300. So without the SSOs and the Director of Security, the change is about $8,600. We have flagged the prorated portion for the Director of Security, the 6 SSOs, the materials related to that, and then the fringe benefits. As we show always, the general education RCs are a positive $182,477. The special education RCs are a deficit of $172,706, and that does primarily relate to the new cap on excess cost reimbursement. As I mentioned, just going through the RCs, there is a positive balance of $2,900 in parking fees as collections did exceed baseline projections. We did put the floating RC in middle school, RC3, the floating SSO, excuse me. And so that forecasted deficit is $31,176. At Hindley, you'll see the reduction in the positive balance for student interns down to $7,350. And then again, we have the forecasted deficit for the SSO at Hindley. You'll see again the forecasted deficit for the SSO at Holmes, as well as Oxbridge, Royal, and Tokenique. I did want to highlight that we do show a positive balance in elementary intramurals for $7,800. There is a potential that Tokenique might run intramurals. So if that does happen, we'll update that in October. And then in RC 16, you'll see the forecasted deficit for the Director of Security of just over $48,000. Moving on to RC 19, the Director of Curriculum or Director of Mental Health, excuse me, is forecasted a deficit of $147,214. We are asking for the transfer for the full year. As we are assuming a November 1st start date, but should the person actually be hired before that, we wouldn't want to have to come back to the Board of Ed for a secondary transfer. So assuming once position is filled, then in the October report, you'll see a portion of that balance fall back to the forecast. Assuming that that individual isn't an internal candidate, it would likely mean that positive balance will go from $9,700 to just over $50,000. No changes in RC 23 or 24. Health insurance and FICA Medicare are forecasted at a slightly lower balance because of, again, the addition of the SSOs and Director of Security. And then, as I mentioned earlier, ELP revenue is forecasted slightly better, but still a deficit at $33,911. We do have 45 paying students against a budget of 49 students.
Any questions?
Yeah, I just have 2, John.
Go ahead, Dennis. We don't see you, so you're gonna have to just speak up, okay?
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's not your fault.
Rich, a question on the parking at the high school. So we have a balance of $2,900. It's more of a question. I don't recall us raising fees. So do we have enough parking spots for those extra monies we're taking in?
So we didn't raise fees. So when we built the budget, we do assume a certain percentage of students will get effectively a scholarship if they apply. So we ended up giving that less scholarships than we anticipated in the budget. We wanted to be a little bit conservative. So this is just the extra money for students who didn't necessarily have to apply for scholarships. I do want to highlight, though, the parking fee is $110. You'll notice it's not a round dollar amount. We do net the cost of actually making and printing the parking passes against the revenue.
Okay.
Which is why it's not an even amount.
Okay, perfect. And then my second question is more of an accounting part. Or is our plan to, and maybe we should have asked this, well, maybe not, but with the SSOs, are we planning to keep them in each RC that they reside, or are we going to make a special tab for security since we now have a director and direct reports?
You have 2 options. One, you could apply them to the individual RCs, the individual school RCs, or you can actually create a security RC, and probably be RC 29, I'm guessing. That's really the determination on how the board prefers to see security as a whole.
Okay.
But since we don't have an approved RC for security, as of right now, we're flagging them in the individual school RCs.
What is your preference?
Yeah. Exactly.
So there's two ways to look at it. One is when you don't put them in the individual RCs, it's kind of the same as special education. You don't get a true picture of what that school costs to run, right? So you're not seeing the SSO, or if it's special education, you're not seeing the paraprofessionals or the special education teachers. The one benefit of having a separated RC is you get a full picture of what security will cost the district. It seems that typically here, what we do and the practice has been is to kind of isolate those RCs, similar to what we did with COVID, what we have with special education. So it wouldn't be necessarily a bad idea to have a security RC.
And how would we solidify that a recommendation? Would be a vote of the board, or I mean, is this slated for discussion and upcoming agenda for the board, I guess?
Well, currently it's not a, can you hear me in this?
Yes. Yep.
Currently, that's not the case, because I would recommend that, given discussions that we've had prior about different line items and different accounts and so on and RCs, that we would bring that to the board as a consideration from here. We also have to consider what goes in there, campus monitors or anything else that goes in there. So the idea of consistency and historical data, do we have all that, which we have, obviously. I'm confident we can do that, but it would include a couple of those things. One, bring it to the board, I would recommend, and two, what other things gets transferred in there.
Okay, so that will be a more in-depth upcoming discussion in the next month or so.
I would think we'd want to make a decision before the budget goes to the board. So
Okay.
either between October and November.
Perfect.
I wouldn't expect it to be that big of a discussion. I think people would have an opinion whether it.
Oh, sure. Yeah, we just
I
want to
mean-
go through, proper protocols. So
Right.
it's very clear because it will entail a number of accounting adjustments, both
Right.
historically and how we look at things if we do go forward with that.
We do have a little bit of a mixed strategy. Over time, we've moved psychologists around, we've moved PE teachers around, we've moved music teachers, did I say psychologists already? So I think it would be helpful to see comparable staff and sort of how we're treating it. Because I agree with you, we have a lot of things in special ed, but we have dispersed other staff. So again, it's not a big deal. To your point, it's just what the view shows you. But I think consistency will be one factor that we discuss.
Okay, and then just staying on the SSO standpoint, so we've accounted for it as if the board did approve, the program. The board did vote to take it for a special appropriation, which is a process for the Board of Finance, and ultimately, if they decide to issue a special appropriation, the RTM. However, just hypothetically, if, the Board of Finance, for instance, or the RTM says, you know what, you're running a surplus in your budget, why don't you guys take care of it within your budget? We have the ability to do that, but as you pointed out, right now it's a $9,700 surplus if you account for the SSOs out of this year's budget, the current year budget. However, the mental health, the way we're accounting for the mental health transfer should yield another $50,000, did you say? Or, I'm sorry, $40,000? Yeah. Okay, so we have a,
That's only if he hires internally, correct? Is that,
No,
No.
so you'd have more of a positive balance if you hire internally.
okay,
So what we didn't want to do was bring a prorated portion. Should we hire somebody internally, and then we'd have to come back to the board for another transfer? If you hire somebody externally, the expectation would be that person would have to probably give notice, et cetera. So you should yield that anticipated savings of that November 1st or early November start date. Person who wouldn't have to obviously give notice is if you hire somebody internally. So you'd be that positive 50,000. So we did flag the SSOs and the director of security as a deficit. Should the town give it a special appropriation, then it would essentially refund that deficit. If the town decides not to give the special appropriation and the board wants to continue with the SSOs and the director of security, over time, we'd probably bring recommended transfers for the board to consider. It might not be that we do one big recommended transfer all at once. It might be that you do them in pieces as the year progresses. So the anticipated surplus bringing into account the director of mental health would probably be about $50,000. There's still some factors to consider. We have 5 teaching positions that are still left to be filled. So depending on how those hires shake out, you could either go more positive or more negative. Depending on how the winter shakes out, because it is still early with like snow removal and things like that, you can go either more positive or more negative if it's a bad winter or a good winter. So it's just a matter of, how close to the line do you want to go? Should we not get an appropriation?
Okay, I mean, needless to say, there was a vote, there's a process in place, and we'll go through that process with the special appropriation, see where things flesh out. But this is really helpful to kind of show where, if the special appropriation was not issued for the SSOs, and the board decided to look at its internal options for financing, this is what it could do. But we'd need a, vote of the board for transfers then and that sort of thing. Okay, that's awesome. Thank you very much. And thanks for highlighting the question on the director of mental health. I think that, that
Sure.
you cleared that up too. Anything else? Dennis, any other questions?
Just my point to Jill's point, I think Jill makes a great point that we roll up all these, art and mental health into the RCs. The only thing I will say for the director of security, or not the SSOs and the director of security, you're going to have to, if we're putting the floater in Middlesex Middle School, and then you have five SSOs at each elementary school, and then the director and administration, you're going to have to go through 6 or 7 RCs to find to sum all that up, which is a major initiative, and it's going to be new in the budget. So it might be easier just for this. Well, I don't want to say just this first year, but at least this year to roll it into one so people can see it quickly.
Yeah,
But-
I see your point, and again, this is kind of tangential to what's on the agenda today. So we'll definitely probably see this at the finance committee and the board in an upcoming meeting. Maybe the next one.
Either the next one after that.
Yeah, and not the next board meeting.
Right, yeah.
I meant finance committee. Okay, perfect. You want to just go through the budget transfer, please?
Sure. So there is one transfer recommended for approval. It is to fund the director of mental health. So we did break down the total salary of the director of mental health, 147, the associated Medicare cost and health benefits. We are recommending taking the funds from budget control and then the portion of unused teacher and residents salary savings.
Okay. It's pretty straightforward, and we kind of just discussed it. I would recommend to the board that it executes the transfer. You can, again, once again, explain to the board, why it's the full amount, the thought process.
Do we want to clarify why we went for a transfer here versus, we could have gone for an appropriation for this as well, but we did have the funds and we did feel that this was a very timely, given that the post-vention, prevention timeline, et cetera. So we really felt like this one needed to move as quickly as possible.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep, agreed.
So, I mean, you had the option of using budget control for that.
Sorry, begging pardon, was that a question?
No,
You're welcome to add to it.
I took it as a statement, thank you.
No, I think it was, again, the urgency. We're in a suicide crisis in town, and I'm not going to speak for the board, but my interpretation of it was that, we saw urgency in it and move forward. And again, you look at the dollars that were available in the surplus at the time that we approved it, and this transfer can certainly handle it in the budget. So.
And it certainly would be I don't mind saying, the most pressing at the time.
Right.
I guess that's the last. You just want to go through quickly the food service.
Sure. So the food service had a very good month of September. Average daily sales have exceeded $14,000 per day. So again, we still run at a loss, and usually in the first 5 to 6 months, you kind of have to come out of those initial food costs and the pension costs, et cetera, things like that. So we are forecasting a positive balance of over $200,000. The sales continue to do well. The pavilion continues to do well, and then adult sales / catering continue to do very well.
And anything new in the grant report? Sorry, I skipped those.
No new grants. So everything is relatively the same. We do still have about $50,000 of unencumbered funds left in the ARP ESSER grant that will have to be reappropriated at a certain time. And we have this year and next year to expend those dollars in full.
Okay, great. Any other questions before we move to public comment?
Yeah, are we going to get another unified grant?
We did for $750. We did get one.
Yeah.
It is for elementary unified sports.
Yep. And is that something we plan to continue?
So Dr. Forshaw at Oxford is the individual who's actually gotten the grant.
Yeah,
And so he was lucky enough to get one again for this year. And so obviously if the opportunity arises to
We'll
continue that,
continue.
he'll continue to try to get that.
thank you.
Okay, I think we're ready for public comment. I can't see anything, so you will have to call it out.
Good morning. Anyone in person would like to public comment? There are no raised hands at this time.
All right, so did I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Oh, I'm sorry. Anybody here, guys? Sorry.
No.
She asked them.
Oh,
She asked in person.
motion to adjourn.
Aye.
All right, thank you.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.